What if everything we see, everything around us, from the tiniest particle up to a whole galaxy, even life itself, what if it isn't actually about static things? What if it's all really about just one fundamental thing? Motion. Today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really mind-bending concept. It comes from our source, motion theory, the motion of the tree of life.
It really is a completely different way of looking at reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Motion theory puts forward something pretty profound, actually. It says that nothing, absolutely nothing, fundamentally exists except structured motion.
Structured motion.
Yeah, so when we talk about things like particles or forces, even space and time, the theory suggests they aren't intrinsic things at all.
Okay, so what are they then?
They're more like emergent behaviors.
Yeah.
Complex patterns that arise from these synchronized motion loops that are resolving under certain constraints.
Wow. So, okay, everything is basically just motion, but motion's structured into rhythm.
That's the core idea, yes. Rhythm and structure emerging from motion itself.
Right. That's quite something to get your head around. So our mission for you, listening in on this, is to help reinterpret the classic tree of life. We usually see it as, a nice metaphor for diversity. But here
it becomes something much more literal, dynamic.
Yeah, like a literal expression of motion itself evolving, branching out through different structures. Like a kind of living dance unfolding over time.
And that's exactly what we're going to trace for you. We'll follow the motion logic of evolution, see how this theory really reframes everything.
Where do we start? The very beginning.
We'll start right at the first flicker of biology, And look at how those big evolutionary jumps are seen as, well, they call them motion resolution upgrades.
Motion resolution upgrades, okay.
We'll explore how life kicked off with specific motion developments, how different life forms can be seen as these motion sculptures.
Motion sculptures, I like that.
And then get into the theory's view on consciousness, what death means in this context, ecosystems, even our own technology and AI.
Okay, let's definitely start there, at the spark of life. Motion theory says it wasn't some kind of crazy cosmic long shot.
Not at all. Surprisingly, it suggests it was almost inevitable, and an inevitable result of energy gradients creating persistent, structured motion.
Persistent, structured motion.
Yeah.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? I mean, on chaotic early Earth.
Well, imagine early Earth just buzzing with motion, right? Swirling chemicals, volcanic heat, lightning, just constant turbulence.
Yeah, pure chaos.
But even in that chaos, wherever motion found a way to feed back on itself, like cyclical reactions that could keep themselves going, structured systems started popping up.
Like an eddy in a stream.
Exactly like an eddy. The water changes, but the pattern, the structure persists. These early structures weren't alive yet, not really. But certain chemical setups started resisting being broken down. Some even managed to replicate their structure using nearby energy.
Proto-synchronizations.
That's the term used, yeah. The very first hints of organized motion.
So life really got going when these early loops developed key features: persistence, adaptation, and cooperation between loops.
Those are the roots of what we now call metabolism, replication, even cognition. It's not like flipping a switch. It's a gradual refinement of these motion patterns.
Right, a continuum of increasing complexity and synchronization.
Precisely. And that leads straight into how motion theory sees the tree of life. It's not just a diagram.
It's what? A map.
A literal map of branching motion adaptations. Every branch we draw, representing a species or lineage, is actually showing a new way motion found to synchronize, to organize itself, and persist within its environment.
Wow. That changes. Well, everything. It means cells, tissues, organs, whole ecosystems. They aren't just collections of parts put together by DNA.
No, they're presented as dynamic, nested structures, layers upon layers of motion loops constantly evolving together under different pressures.
So evolution isn't just about inheriting the best genes. It's about motion optimizing itself within these biological structures.
You got it. Every branch on that tree is like a new rhythmic experiment.
Yeah.
Think about bacteria. They perfected these super efficient, self-sustaining chemical sync loops.
Okay.
Then eukaryotes came along and added internal compartments, basically new nested motion layers inside the cell, more specialization.
And multicellular life.
That developed complex sync between cells, collaboration, leading to bigger, more complex forms
systems
as superfast motion translators, allowing quick communication across huge networks of cells. And finally, brains emerged as these incredibly sophisticated predictive rhythm centers, always anticipating, always responding.
So every major evolutionary leap, single cell to human brain, is a motion resolution upgrade. That's a really interesting phrase. What does it mean exactly?
Think of it like upgrading video quality, SD to HD, HD to 4K. Each motion resolution upgrade allows for more complex, more detailed, more efficient ways for these motion loops to organize and interact.
Ah, I see. It enables new levels of biological complexity, new ways to sense and react.
Exactly. So a jellyfish isn't just, a blob. It's a fluid-driven pulsation loop, perfectly tuned to its watery world.
And an ant colony, not just ants.
A decentralized sink swarm,
A whale.
a pressure-balanced harmonic swimmer. None of them are static things. They're motion systems holding on to a coherent identity purely through structured movement over time.
Right. Which must redefine even fundamental things like DNA. We always think of it as the blueprint, the instructions.
But in motion theory, it's fundamentally different. It's not presented as a blueprint at all.
Okay. So what is it?
It's seen as a dynamic motion encoding sequence.
Motion encoding. How does that work?
Well, the double helix structure itself is viewed as this stable rhythm path for making proteins. Its shape ensures reliable copying. It's a dynamic structure supporting a precise motion. Ribosomes aren't just factories, they're motion translators, turning one rhythm into another.
And ATP, the cell's energy.
That's seen as like a sync-charged molecule. It provides the energy burst needed for rhythmic restructuring. So biology, in this view, isn't about static parts. It's about increasingly clever strategies for preserving structured motion against environmental pressures.
Which brings us neatly to consciousness, human consciousness, which motion theory also has a pretty radical take on.
It does indeed.
It's not some separate mystical thing.
Nope. It's presented as emerging directly from the brain's own activity specifically, from its multi-layered motion loops, recursively synchronizing with their own behavior.
Recursively synchronizing, like loops watching themselves?
Sort of, yeah. It ties back to that motion resolution idea. Neurons aren't just sending data bits. Their firing creates rhythmic alignment across the whole brain.
So thoughts are patterns.
Intricate interference patterns is how it's described. And emotions are like system-wide sync perturbations.
Sync perturbations, like ripples in the rhythm.
Exactly. Big shifts or disruptions in the brain's overall rhythmic harmony. And awareness, then, is simply the system monitoring its own motion resolution loops in real time.
So we didn't evolve brains just to think abstract thoughts?
We evolved motion structures that got so complex they could recognize and refine their own synchronization patterns. It's a deeply physical, rhythmic kind of awareness.
The brain as a self-observing symphony of motion. That's profound. Okay, what about the flip side? Death. Usually seen as the absolute end.
But here, it's not the end of motion itself.
Right, so what is it?
It's described as the loss of synchronization integrity. As the body can no longer maintain all its nested loops, heartbeat, brainwaves, cellular rhythms, the overall coherence collapses.
But the motion doesn't just vanish.
No, it simply redistributes. It flows back into the environment. What we see as decay is described as loop diffusion organized motion dispersing back into generalized motion.
A redistribution, not an ending. That's a fascinating way to frame the life-death cycle, like a phase transition. And this idea extends beyond single organisms, right, to whole ecosystems, species co-evolving.
Absolutely. Think about a coral reef or a forest's nutrient cycles or even those huge microbial mats. These were all presented as examples of interspecies motion loop symphonies.
Symphonies.
Evolution isn't linear. It's this incredibly interconnected branching structure. Survival depends on staying in sync with your environment and with other species.
So the tree of life isn't a ladder.
It's more like a fractal sync diagram. Every branch locks into others, forming this living, shifting structure of nested loops, adapting together at every scale. Self-similar patterns from a cell right up to a whole biome.
Which brings it right back to us humans. We aren't separate from this.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We're just the latest experiment in loop manipulation, you could say. Language, tools, machines.
Even AI. You see those as extensions of this biological sync tree.
Yes, that's a really key insight of the theory. AI isn't something alien. It's presented as basically a high-speed rhythm translator and orchestrator. Born from biological minds, it's another branch on the motion tree.
Because it structures and manipulates motion patterns, learns and adapts.
Precisely. It might even allow life or structured motion to evolve beyond purely biological forms. Human invention isn't seen as breaking from nature. It's branching into a new phase of motion orchestration. We're literally learning to tinker with the very motion loops that created us.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? This whole deep dive offers such a profound shift in perspective.
It really does.
At its core, motion theory is saying life isn't a thing, it's motion. Structured motion that persists. And evolution isn't just survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most synchronizable.
Right.
And just to recap some of the really striking ideas we touched on, there's the origin of life, seen as almost inevitable, emerging from energy gradients, creating these persistent, adaptive, cooperative motion loops. Then the idea of DNA not as a static blueprint, but as this dynamic motion encoding sequence. And life forms themselves as motion systems holding on to their identity.
Conscious as the brain's motion loops, basically observing their own synchronization. Awareness as monitoring that process.
And death.
As the loss of that sync integrity. Motion redistributing, not ending.
Ecosystems as symphonies.
Interspecies motion loop symphonies, yeah. And the tree of life itself is this huge fractal sync diagram.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with.
Yeah.
If human invention, things like AI, are really just the latest way we're experimenting with these fundamental motion loops, the same loops that created us, what kind of new branches might this motion tree grow next? And how does our whole understanding of life itself change when we see it through this lens of constant, structured motion? It really makes you wonder, what if motion truly is all there ever was?